If there was a mandate to stop the train when you sight a human or a cattle on a track, the trains in India would crawl, they would not run.
Hello and welcome to Questioning Mind. I'm your host Sagarika, and today it is my pleasure to be rejoined by Sudhanshu Mani, who was here some weeks ago, and his video has been one of the most popular and re-requested videos. So I'm really glad that he could make the time today. Sudhanshu ji, welcome, namaste.
Thank you very much for having me. Namaskar.
All right. So I'll start off with something in the railway space that I know has been raging for some time. So this is great timing to have you back. So Dhanshuji, when it comes to the cattle runover incidents that have been happening, I think there have been three so far, and there's a lot of noise. Like we in the Indian scenario, citizens are quite used to such incidents, but it's been happening with the Vande Bharat Express, the Train 18 series. So that's something that people, for some reason, did not expect, and media coverage has been very high.
Yeah.
And it seems controversial at this time that this is even happening. Could you shed some light on this for the viewers? I know you wrote a very extensive blog, and I'll bring that up as well.
Oh, yeah, sure. All right. So, uh, you see this third Vande Bharat, the uh, Mumbai Gandhinagar,
Yes.
was in news, as you said, after its grand launch by the PM. And barely 6 days after that, it encountered a herd of buffaloes on the track and ran them over. Uh, so the nose cone of the train was damaged, badly damaged, and the images were splashed all over the social media, as you know. Later, politics also creeped in with opposition party leaders tweeting that barely 6 days after the train was inaugurated, this is the state of the train, which was unfortunate. I would say shameless because they sounded gleeful that something like this has happened to the train. Well, let's keep that aside. Uh, this was a bit of a deja vu for me because, especially this negativity which creeped in, because when the train was inaugurated 3.5 years back in 2019, on the inaugural run, which was not a commercial run, on the return there was a technical snag, and similar propaganda had ensued at that time. So, that's why I said it was a bit of a deja vu. I mean, many opposition leader, even the chief of a pharma company from Bangalore, all of them had a lot of bad words to say about ICF and Indian Railways and so on. There were some who supported as well. Now, that the train was damaged was news, certainly, but I think a bigger news was that it was repaired overnight and
Mm.
it resumed its journey after rectification of the nose. When that happened, all the scoffers, they kind of vamoosed. But unfortunately, the train hit a cow the next day. This time the damage was not that big, but yes, the nose got a little depressed, and that picture also started doing the rounds. Uh, since I tweeted on the issue, so a lot of people agreed as true Indians. Many raised queries, which is fine. Some even gave outlandish solutions. A few questioned the design with their half-baked knowledge and so on. And there was a lot of trawlers as well. Now, that's why I wrote the blog, which you referred to. So let's go one by one. As you also said, it's nothing unusual on IR.
Mm.
India has a huge bovine population, I think the highest in the world. And we are used to have cattle moving loose all over the country. I mean, that's a fact of life, isn't it? And most of the time, or many times, without supervision.
Mm.
We cannot also deny that in this recent politics over slaughtering of cattle and so on, the number of stray cattle, older stray cattle, has increased uh, because these stray cattle have no ownership and they just stray around, particularly in the north and west of the country.
Mhm.
Now, I have done hundreds of footplates. A footplate is when you travel on the cab of a locomotive. And in my hundreds, I don't have the number, perhaps it'll be 300 or 400. I experienced cattle run over, as we call it, CRO,
Mhm.
from the cab 3 times. And believe me, the driver cannot do anything in this situation. And he's not supposed to do. That's even more important. The train has a legal right of way on the track, and vehicles and humans and everyone else can traverse only in an authorized condition, like on a level crossing or railway maintenance staff and so on. So he is not supposed to stop his train merely because of a human or a cattle obstruction on the track. He would whistle, try to alert them, and so on. If there was a mandate to stop the train when you sight a human or a cattle on a track, the trains in India would crawl, they would not run. So, having clarified that, now let's say, what are the means to avoid them? Before going there, let me tell you, at a guess, there would be some 10 cases every day on Indian Railways of cattle run over, perhaps more. All these cases are with locomotive halt trains where the locomotive has a sturdy cow catcher in the front, and the cow or the cattle buffalo gets thrown away. At times it gets goes below the engine also. Minor damage to brake system also takes place, but it's a regular happening. Why it has become highlighted here is also because of two reasons. First of all, the government has built up unnecessary hype about the train. You see, it's a good train, you should be proud of. But building this hype was also, to my mind, was not correct because, like comparing it with bullet train, for example, I mean, we are
Mhm.
far behind the Japanese. We should be proud, but we should not be foolishly proud, is what I would say. So, if you go for this kind of hype, then one has to be prepared for exaggerated criticism also. And that's what happened here. The train receded into the background, and you know, that you are slaughtering cows, to all kinds of things started. I have clarified that. Train has a right of way on the track and will not start braking on sighting a trespassing human or cat. Except some exceptions in wild animal territory, you are mandated to slow down, keep a watch, or an obstruction which can damage a train. A cow or a cattle rarely damages a train for any safety issue. It is safe enough. Some damage may take place.
Mhm.
In pre-independence India, we did have some fence tracks. We even used to have a designated cattle crossing because cattle also has a memory. They also kind of follow a memory. Elephants have a great memory to cross a track at the same spot. So some facilitation was also done, some crossing in which cattle could move, but a four-wheeler could not. But all that is long gone because of socio-economic factors in the country. Our fields have been divided to very small fields now, and a lot of people have their housing on one side and field on the other side, or even the track passing right through their field and so on. So these crossings have a socio-economic angle. So any comparison with Europe system is not really is really out of place because either they have elevated high speed tracks, so there cannot be any cattle crossing, or even and most of their high speed tracks are also fenced. But many of their high speed tracks, high speed means semi high speed and above, are not fenced. They believe they don't want to act like a nanny for the public, that they
Right.
should be taught to this is trespassing is wrong and so on. And also, they don't have stray cattle. Their cattle is kept are kept on in enclosures. You don't have stray cattle moving around. So it's a question of responsibility of the public also, where we have a lot to do yet. Now, the design of the nose. Knowing that we will have this kind of cases, what we had designed was a very strong frame covered with a nose covering uh, for two purposes. One is, of course, aerodynamic profiling, which is worked out based on computational flow dynamics. I'll not get into that to get the best result at high speed, 160 kilometers per hour, in terms of resistance offered by air and the aesthetics. You see, one of the USP of the trains is its nose, the way it looks. The coach and the train, same. If it was a 160-kilometer train hauled by a locomotive, you and I would not be doing this program.
Mm.
So So we knew that the nose has to be there. If we put an ugly cow catcher in front, that USP would be lost. So what was designed was a strong frame with a FRP covering. In case of such smashes, it's not a crash, it's not a collision, it's just hitting a cattle. This nose would get damaged and can be then replaced in the depot. In a way, a sacrificial kind of covering. And that's what happened. They replaced it within no time, overnight. What needs to be done now is to see how this design can be improved, which, in my view, they should have done over the last 3 years. But let's not go into that. So that this change of the nose section becomes easier than it is today, because such CROs would keep happening. You should be prepared to restore the train faster than we are able to do today. That's one requirement. And of course, the last issue is fencing of the track. The train has been designed for 160 kilometer per hour operation. At that speed, fencing is a must even in India. Whatever little 160 kilometer per hour track we have is fenced, at least on paper. It maybe villagers have broken it at places and so on. So the train design assumes that the track would be fenced and there would be no cattle intrusion on the track. So run the train on fenced part, easier said than done because the fencing is not there at all except some very small section. So the Delhi Mumbai, Delhi Howrah sections, which are sanctioned for 160 kilometer per hour operation, work is going on, albeit very slowly, should be speeded up. And before we provide a permanent fencing, we should even think of providing temporary fencing using, concrete sleepers or some barbed wire type of fencing, which can be done quickly in the cattle prone area, which can also be determined. It's not as if cattle is there all over. There are definitely prone areas. So that should be done instead of, this knee-jerk reactions which we see. The train is good. What we need to do is improve the design of the nose, as I said, and take up this fencing work on a war footing. I'll conclude by saying once again, as is my habit, somehow to borrow from my uncles, is uh, when all this happened, I was reminded of, As You Like It, where Touchstone, the jester, says, the more pity that fools may not speak wisely, what wise men do foolishly. So, because there are all kinds of people talking of all kinds of things, even trolling and abusing me,
Right.
and I'm sure the government and so on. So, it's a pity that I'm not pretentious enough to call myself wise, but it's a pity that the sane voices get drowned. It's time to rise above that and look for a permanent solution. I'm sorry for a very long discourse, but it's almost as if I read my blog from my memory, but that's how it is. Thank you.
That's where the blog flows from. So no, I'm sure the viewers welcome it because I'll be honest, deep knowledge in anything at this point is actually lacking. And so to have somebody with that expertise explaining every aspect of it is necessary. What we see, I think, all indigenous manufacturing witnesses this kind of political backlash because we've seen this
Yeah.
with the training team, we've seen this with teachers, we've seen anything where we put our engineers, Indian engineers, to use, we see that sort of backlash. But it was
So
good to see.
I'll stop you there and say this once again. You see, less people they see half of it and they kind of derive different meaning. We have to be proud of what we did. Pride only brings excellence, right?
Sure.
But we should not be, we should not exaggerate. You see, it is like comparing this train with bullet train is like our ISRO fellow coming to your program and saying that, yeah, we did this, now we have become equivalent of NASA. You and I will not accept that statement. Instead, if they come and say we have designed a great rocket or a great satellite, we'll be proud and be happy about it. So, because of the hype, also, it results in all the opponents are just, raring to go something wrong and then I'll berate you. All that is not good for the country.
I think that is a point, considering that it's been so long since we actually got into indigenous manufacturing. It is a matter of great pride, and I think to push that message out to a lot of millions of people, I think that hype was created. However, it's understandable at this point that I think everything gets politically used. So, but moving beyond that, about the Kavach system that was tested by our Railways Minister. So that is an anti-collision system. That is it not part of this train?
Yes, it is very much part of the train. It was not there in the first two because Kavach was not planned for universalization at stage. Kavach is what you would call a third party equipment. That means Kavach has been developed by Indian Railways in association with three companies. It's their equipment which will come and fit it on the train. It is not a USP of the train, but it's a requirement.
Yeah.
So it is very much part of the train. And since you raised the issue, I will, if you have time, I'll tell you a little bit about Kavach because there are misconceptions about that as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, please.
So you see, Kavach, Kavach is a modern signaling system. In Europe, the modernization of the signaling system started with what is called ETCS level one, which has trackside transponders to transmit signal aspects of the station or wherever on the track as the movement authority in the form of a signal on the cab, and it also gives you other things like route data and so on. So you need these transponders on the track. The next technology level, which is mostly being used in Europe, is called ETCS level 2, which is a GSMR or GPRS radio based system, which displays signaling, route data, movement parameters in the cab, but through continuous exchange of information, including its position and direction and so on. I'll not go into too much of track details. All this has, gone to a theoretical ETCS level 3 system, which is futuristic, in which does away with all trackside equipment. And the control system receives the positioning of each train continuously and calculates the smallest possible train distance at any time. And therefore, so there is a real time determination of the point on the route, and the entire train can safely clear and reach the following train to the closest possible. It's not restricted by the conventional block. Now, uh, Kavach has a history of arising from a system called Raksha Kavach, which was a simple anti-collision system, which was not a signaling system. But at some point, RDSO and Indian Railways decided that this system should have a modern signaling features on par with ETCS level 2, which is called the distance to go signaling. So, without going into technical details alone, I can tell you that this system was indigenously developed, is a robust system, has been tried out in South Central Railway, is now to be provided on the same Delhi, Howrah, and Delhi, Mumbai corridors. to add to be kind of complement the 160 kilometer per hour capability. And it's a wonderful development to my mind because it's first of all fully indigenous, and it would cost one fourth of what ETCS level 2 would cost. There was some opposition, obviously, people who wanted to import ETCS level 2, and those who thought that this was merely an anti collision system and not up to the mark, and so on. But all that opposition has been kind of abandoned after the minister tested the system itself. And it's a system which should be done yesterday because it would add a lot of capability, line capacity, as well as safety of the train operation. And I would say a must for this 160-kilometer operation as well. So all Vande Bharat will have to be equipped with this. The infrastructure on the ground has still not been built up. It's in the process. I hope it happens quickly. Sorry once again for giving you a long lecture on Kavach, but it's not as if just fitting it on the train would work. The matching infrastructure on the ground has to be there, and in matching trains moving on the section.
No, we need the long lecture. So, my question is that this is going to prevent any CRO incidents going forward?
Any no, no, no. By the way, you see, we are not fitting anything inside the cattle, so
Right,
this
right.
will not. It will only see obstruction. So as I told you, a train hitting a human or a cattle is not a crash.
Mm,
It's a very big thing hitting a very small thing. It may cause
mm.
small damage to the train. What you have to avoid is a crash with another train,
Right,
crash with
right.
another moving body, authorized moving unauthorized body, moving body on the track, moving vehicle on the track. So it will detect any such collision possibility because the other train is also equipped with Kavach, and it can, they can detect and avoid that. But there is no system in it for avoiding, things like CRO. CRO solution is fencing.
Fencing is quite expensive. So fencing for cattle-prone areas, etc. Is that something that the railways will even look at now?
Yeah, yeah, sure. They must. It is expensive, but it is unavoidable. If you have dreams of going to 160 kilometer per hour, the CCRS will not even permit you to run the train at 160 till the track is fenced. So it's an absolute requirement. You have to spend that money. In fact, there may be many things which are they are doing in the overhead equipment in the track, and I'll not get into that detail. But fencing and Vande Bharat type train, some upgradation of the track in terms of its structure and cushioning and so on. That's what will take us to 160 kilometers per hour easily. I'm not even going to other things. And it can be done and should be done on war footing, not like last 5 years we are hearing about it. Now they are saying March 2024. I doubt if they'll stick to it, but if they really put their grit into it, it can happen. And till that happens, as you said, in cattle-prone areas, we can put temporary kind of fencing using rejected railway materials and so on that our civil engineers are capable of working out. Yeah.
So, when it comes to March 2024 for something like high-speed railways, how much of the network do you see being modernized to reach those speeds?
Okay. So first of all, where can we reach? To my mind, based on my technical experience, I may not be very accurate. Uh, are the quadrilaterals connecting the four metros and our diagonals connecting the diagonal of the quadrilaterals uh, are the ones we should upgrade to. I would loosely say up to 180 to 190 kilometers per hour. 200 also seems a little difficult, but maybe it's feasible. That should be the aim. You cannot go beyond that. We are talking of 160 now. We can go above with improvements in the train, not necessarily in the infrastructure. But infrastructure was 160, let it be done quickly. And then improvement in the train, maybe in OHE and signaling and so on, we can always think of 180, 190. Because the train during test has shown that it can run at 180 even on this track without any safety issue. So our sight should be, let's say 200, and we may achieve 180, 190, whatever. It should be, I would say, a 10-year plan if we start now, and it's possible, it can be done. That's for the, it's not really high speed, it's still semi high
Yeah.
speed. So, your question was high speed. Maybe I think I remember we talked about it, but I'll say it again. So, in the world today, high speed railway is something which competes directly with air,
Always.
with flights. This semi high speed will not, unless it's a distance like Mumbai Ahmedabad. With air it can, perhaps, to some extent. This would be speeds above 250 kilometers per hour, 250 to 300, 320, 350. Every country in the world with any developed railway system, except USA and maybe Australia and South Africa, perhaps, because they have their own lobbies and issues and so on. Every single European country, China, Korea, Japan, of course, and many middle level countries, middle income level countries have either got high speed railways or are going for it.
Hmm.
That tells you enough. I mean, India cannot be such an exception that we debate for last 25 years that it's not good for us, who will travel in it, economics, and so on. Procrastination and debate, endless, is not good. But after this government came, they decided they will build one, Mumbai Ahmedabad, which is in hand, albeit very slowly for
Hmm.
other so many issues. That's bad. But I would think this one plus at least one more, or maybe two more, we must build. We are a large country with funds available to do that. Having done that, it cannot be a waste. It will serve a good purpose. Then work out very, very carefully whether this is good for India or not. Don't think of 5,000, 10,000 kilometers right away, trying to copy China. So my vote would be 2 to 3 high-speed lines, have them functioning, then evaluate, and if you find that it's something very beneficial for the traveling people and the economy, go for more and more network. And that would be my roadmap. The conducting these feasibility studies on 10 different sections and so on, and not even moving very fast in the one section that you already have sanctioned. I mean, all that is, to my mind, the sense of purpose is lost.
Okay, apart from the Vande Bharat Express trains, what do we have in terms of indigenous manufacturing in the railway network? You mentioned, Kavach is totally indigenously developed, but what are the systems and infrastructure, etc., is unique to us?
Okay. If you go by the existing rolling stock, signaling, and other systems in Indian Railways, the level of import is already very low. It's not very high. The question of import comes when you go for an upgrade. So, Kavach is an upgrade which is replacing a possible and coveted import, which is not taking place. So that's a good part. Vande Bharat is same. It is has some import content, but it's mainly largely designed designed of course in India, largely even spares mostly 80%, and now perhaps a little bit more, all Indian. And it is replacing a product which would otherwise have been imported. Whereas what we already build is already indigenous, with some exceptions for which there is a make in India policy of Indian Railways, which is nothing to write home about, because that foolish policy, I call it, only says that you import something for rupees 100, sell it for, in broad terms, it doesn't say so, but it works out you import for 100 rupees, sell it for 210. then you can claim that the value added in India is more than 50%. Nobody goes and checks that for what have you increased the price to 100. That kind of bureaucratic approach to solving this Make in India problem is not good at all. Whatever is imported today can be made in India with some effort. And for that, we need encouragement, solid encouragement, and not this kind of bureaucratic Make in India policy
Mhm.
which Indian Railways has. This is not the case in case of metros and RRTS and other Indian railway systems which are coming up, which, as I have been saying, are, they look up to the rolling stock major or the major companies in the world. They still don't have confidence in Indian manufacturers, including coach builders, other companies here or organizations, and the design of these trains are done abroad. Maybe
Mm.
a lot of screwdriver manufacture is done in India. So it defeats the very purpose of Atmanirbhar. I have been saying this strongly everywhere, but I think mine is a lone voice. No, nobody likes to. When I raise this subject, they say, "Look at the quality of that made in India. Look at that, and how can you match this?" All that starts. So you defeat yourself even before the war has begun. Yeah, the war should be, yes, we are not good enough, but give us the chance. Government should give us the support. Give us a not a level playing field. Right now, the field is skewed in favor of foreign companies. You skew it in favor of Indian companies, and then see the result. So I don't know whether I've answered your question, but this is what needs to be done strongly, and I hope it happens someday. And in these sectors also, we see a lot of Indian companies becoming reliable suppliers.
I mean, you did it, so I'd hope that somebody else at least takes that as inspiration and fights for more of it. But I do think that Indians, like the Chinese 2 3 decades ago, have this habit of using templates and references way more often, and that might come from a lack in R&D also, no? A lack of
Yes,
funding and lack of
yes, 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 yes,
setup on R&D.
absolutely. So it's not as if the government has failed and the private sector has covered itself in glory. No. Uh, but you see, the private sector has to look at the bottom line.
Mm.
The government doesn't look at any bottom line. That's a fact of life here. Government spends, it's a big spender. So
Mm.
are we spending it to increase designing and developing capability in the country? Because that's what will take you where you are aiming to be in 10, 15, 20 years. You will be a designer of products, not mere manufacturer and a factory of the world. That has to emanate from the government. Now, if the government spends on these companies or the manufacturers, be it in government, public, or largely public and private, if the government gives that impetus, a lot of products would be developed here, and that's why I said that R&D will definitely take place, but the onus lies on the government. Starts with the government. You would have heard of the PIL scheme, productivity linked incentive scheme. So that is helping. If you read about it, so I'm not an expert in it, but it is helping certain sectors. There are some sectors covered by this in not only manufacturing in India but also developing products in India. So that's a good scheme. In case of rolling stock, I would say it is very, very important that India should develop its own product. Then only it will be able to export. Mere manufacture will not be able to help you to grow to be a global powerhouse in rolling stock or railways.
Right. Makes sense. Makes sense because I think that is definitely. Do you think that bureaucracy, the kind of red tapeism that you've also spoken about sometimes, do you think that that gets in the way of, like you mentioned, the policy design? How does that get an overhaul? Because I'm not sure that the government functions in terms of overhauling the bureaucracy. They've been here 8 years. That's not really happened to the extent one would expect if you see inefficiency.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So So bureaucracy here is, I would describe it as a slumbering giant which has still not woken up to its potential. So, but I have to, having been a bureaucrat myself, I have to start with a caveat. You know, the country recruits the best for its bureaucracy, starting with IS and other services. But we are not getting the best output. There
Mm,
are islands of excellence which should be highlighted. It's always reporting the negativity is not good. I'm reminded of my senior from college, an IS officer, Mr. Anil Swaroop. He runs an organization called Nexus of Good. And this organization is working. I mean, after retirement, he's working with this organization. He's handling this organization, and the one of the aims is to highlight the good work done by bureaucrats, and mainly bureaucrats and other sectors also. So I don't want to paint all the bureaucrats with the same brush. Uh, I have I've worked with some wonderfully capable government servants in railways and even outside railways. And in fact, some of the things I did in life in railways was after learning from them. So I'm
mm,
not trying to, as I said, paint all of them with the same brush, but nevertheless, I mean, there is no gainsaying the overall, in a summary, the failure of bureaucracy to really take India forward. And at this
yeah,
point, yeah,
right.
go ahead.
No,
No, no,
sorry,
go ahead.
I meant more the system than the people, because of course we do hear some good work
Yeah,
coming out of
so yeah,
India, like
all right,
myself
understood,
being an
understood,
example.
understood. So people actually make the system.
Mm,
So how the people function is a reflection of the system, right? So let me go into it, and I will have to borrow again from my poet uncles. I'll take 2 3 minutes, or maybe a little more.
sure.
So one thing is, maybe I keep saying it, so I would have said it on your last show, but what sums up the bureaucracy largely is दिन रात तुम्हारी महफिल में दिन रात की बातें होती हैं कुछ बात नहीं होती लेकिन बेबात की बातें होती हैं जिस बात की बातें होती हैं उस बात में कोई बात नहीं जिस बात की कोई बात नहीं उस बात की बातें होती हैं जिस बात में इतनी बात पढ़ी उस बात में कोई बात न थी जिस बात पे बात आ जाती है तब बात की बातें होती हैं दिस in a humorous way generally kind of summarizes the way bureaucracy in India functions. But I don't even remember who's the shire, but I will have to go to the bard because instead of going round and round in a lot of speeches and lectures, I will only tell you very strong, which come to my mind from him, which define it. You see, so in King John, strong reasons make strong actions. That's what
Mm,
bureaucracy is for. So what happens is strong reasons make strong talk and weak action. Now we know what we are from Hamlet, but know not what we may be. Perfectly all right. But what happens is, again, Portia from Merchant of Venice, if to do were as easy as to know what were good to do, chapels had been churches and poor men's cottages, princesses' palaces. So, in spite of knowing, we don't do. Although, in doing, it gives you, since you have a large canvas, immense pleasure. So, from Troilus and Cressida, things one are done, joy's soul lies in the doing. That's one. So this is ideally what should happen, and also a bit about integrity and honesty, which is so important. You see, and after retirement, I feel I really can tell you it's very important because I have experience of these wonderful bureaucrats I worked with, and since I tried to copy them my own, so no legacy is as rich or is so rich as honesty. All's well that ends well. More importantly, virtue is bold and goodness never fearful. If you have that virtue, you will be bold to do. And unfortunately, suspicion always haunts the guilty mind, but still there are so many people who are guilty. Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. Your head must be uneasy because the canvas given to you is such a large canvas. But what happens is, to sum up, the funny one, ना करदा गुनाहों की भी हसरत की मिले दाद यारब अगर इन करदा गुनाहों की सजा है, which simply means that I desire that I should receive kudos for the sins I did not commit. Oh Lord, if I am sure to be punished for the sins I did commit.
Right.
But since doing something has a risk of punishment, unfortunately, so I should be rewarded for not doing anything at all. We need to rectify this system.
Mm.
It's not just a lecture, I'm speaking from experience. And if we rectify this, then only India can reach its true potential, 110% of its potential once you have this premium on performance and this risk averse nature of our bureaucracy has to be done away with. But it has to start first from the bureaucracy itself. Don't suck up to the unstable kingly
You know,
era. Don't suck up to these politicians. But support of politicians is also important if they really want to reform this country. And self motivation can work, but it should be motivation across the board. And it may be a tall order, but it is perfectly doable. So I think I got lost somewhere, but this is my recipe, and it's doable.
mm.
Unless it is done, uh, the change in system will not take place because this is the system which needs to be rectified.
Do you think that lateral entry into bureaucracy helps at all if
All right,
people are
good
used to
question. So
work?
lateral entry up to joint secretary level has been done. Maybe it has had some advantages, but I don't think that's going to really help unless we empower the very top. You see, the ideas flow from the bottom, and that's when it works. When ideas flow from the top, they are impositions, they don't work.
No, true, true. That is true.
So the top is so important. The leader is so important. So I would say I would start with appointment of honest experts, first as ministers. I mean, you have, I don't know how many, 50, 60, 70 ministers, have at least 10 of them who are experts in their field. And then lateral entry at secretary level. Why is it not possible? Take people from the industry, experts from the industry, give them, empower them, and you will immediately see a change. So a lot of thing is, it has to emanate from leadership. I keep saying leadership is the key. Leadership will reform the system. Leadership will motivate, and leadership can take you to greater heights.
Why I asked that question was because when you work in the industry, it's very easy to have and to incentivize for a manager to create those incentives. And
Uh,
I think that was something that was discussed by the UP government at some point. I'm not sure that's in place, but somebody was thinking about it. So that sort of thinking in the bureaucracy at some point, rewarding excellence, punishing um, laziness and inefficacies that might be necessary at some point because it is a job for life, and unless somebody is pushed to voluntary retirement, it's not something, and we can't afford to lose so many people. And when you said that being rewarded for not doing anything, I think that's become a little bit part of the system now. If from the top, if that is the way of life, if maintaining status quo from 70 years ago is part of life, then one must be rewarded for not doing anything at all. Or, even if they do badly, they know they only do so because they are protected by those, who empowered them to do so. And they
correct.
are in power. So I think that's become a way of life, some massive overhaul in terms of modernizing the bureaucracy in easy ways. I think, like you mentioned, leaders.
Yeah.
incentives, etc.
So that's why you're right. That's why I talk about leadership.
Mm,
If the leadership itself decides, okay, the system is rotten, these people don't work,
mm,
right? Bureaucracy doesn't deliver. What good is that?
mm,
The, the things have to emanate from the leaders. So that's why I said if the leadership of the country, which which can be any number of people, give or take whatever. So if the leadership desires a change, then it has to start from that leadership. And the system will reform itself once the leadership decides that what's happening is not good enough. I have to make a transformation, metamorphosis, not some incremental change here and there. It has to emanate from the leadership. It cannot be done through policy changes and reforms and so on. It has to have that resolve at the very top, and things will happen, believe me. But वो चलता है या fear of losing elections, and there may be so many other reasons which are more important than reforming the country and taking the country to progress. If people in the country are happy with the hype, uh, I'm not blaming any particular government. That's been our story for so long. So, but if that resolve comes to the very top, uh, leadership of various facets, various parts of the country, things will start changing.
Well, I think people like you to give some hope. And for the viewers, Sudhanshu ji has videos where he's the TEDx speaker, and he's a speaker on leadership and system changes. So I'll link one of those videos below, and if you like this video, to share it, because obviously there are caveats that can be used, that apply to some of these things, but most of this is very inspirational and can be used for many sectors. So, but coming back to the railways, Sudhanshuji, there is one more incident that actually happened recently. I'm not sure if it came to your notice, but a man put out a frantic tweet talking about how his wife and newly born child were on a train being harassed by some drunken men. And reaching out via SMS, via calls, did not help. Now, we were not informed about the presence of railway police. Is security in Indian railways a matter of concern? Because we've grown up in decades where people were looted on trains. We had things stolen on trains. People were drugged and their things were stolen. Those things have changed massively. But these incidents can lead to bigger ones. So, is it still a major concern?
Okay. So let me clarify something in the beginning. Of course, I mean, not trying to deflect anything from the responsibility of railways. I'll be the last person to do it. But your viewers should know that the Railway Protection Force is for the protection of railway property, whereas protection of people on the train, if it's a law and order issue, is essentially uh, is in charge of the government railway police, which is under the state government. Information to them has to be passed from the railway personnel, be it the commercial staff or the railway protection force. So as you can see in this scenario, the railway protection force, the railway commercial staff, and the government railway police have to work strongly together. The incident, for example, you talk about, it's deplorable, and some drunken people can behave this way, but exemplary punishment. I'm not saying some kind of a jungle justice, but exemplary punishment in arresting them and charging them and taking them to court so that they get punished early is very essential. So, of course, it's a concern. Uh, I don't know whether the security system in railways today has improved. I have a feeling it has, but I don't have data, so I'll not, commit myself to anything there. But this this working of railway staff and the protection force together uh, in a very cohesive, coordinated manner is essential. It should happen. And I'm not at all saying that this responsibility should be, you know, divested, invested in railways. No, their job is to run trains. It's essentially a law and order issue. The system is all right, but there is a diffusion of responsibility and dereliction of duty which should be dealt strongly with. This is all I would like to say here.
All right. Okay, let's move on to logistics then. India has a massive gap. We lag behind in terms of the potential of logistics. On one hand, we get startups and Amazon and even the biggest Flipkart. Everybody's trying to do last mile delivery, and I think a lot of it is loss making. It's not a profit making ventures as of now, but these things have taken up a lot of mental and news space as well for people when urban areas get deliveries in 10 minutes and things like that. But when it comes to connecting the entirety of the country, goods, cargo, and heavy goods, perishables, agricultural goods, all of those things, we have a massive lag. And industries bear most of the brunt of it. Now, railways, I think we did discuss it last time, and I'm linking the video up here. Um, we did discuss this how railways play into the logistics lacunae. So, do you think that we will be able to progress to a point where the railways does fulfill this role?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's inescapable. It's not a question of whether railways should or would be able to do it. It's absolutely essential. You see, it's not just about what happens domestically, but it has to be on a with a global outlook. You see, India has to reposition itself to exploit the opportunities which are presented by this globalization through seamless access to low cost raw materials, skilled human resources, and export markets with resource reallocations and outflow of value added services. So it obviously requires linkages with global economy and an efficient logistics systems in the country. Now, to improve this efficiency, we first must know where we stand compared to global economies. And that's why the government, you would have heard of National Council of Applied Economic Research, NCAER, was engaged to estimate the logistics costs in India and to identify the challenges. Now, what did they find in their recent report? Is the transportation cost contributes to nearly 50% of the total logistics cost by road as well as rail. And this is primarily, I would assume, due to high cost of energy and fuel. But the transportation speed, you'll be surprised to know, is around 21 kilometers per hour for both road and rail. There are some good exceptions where it is far beyond this, but this is the average. When the service is integrated, the logistics, if it's an integrated service provider, the costs are lower. But and in fact, on many busy routes, when the cargo is moved by rail, the logistics are most efficient. Obviously, lower fuel cost, large volume of traffic moved, and so on from point to point. But what happens, as I think you also mentioned, is this advantage is neutralized by the unpredictability of delivery time. First of all, with railways, they don't move to any timetable. The cargo trains, and there are some infrastructural structural bottlenecks and so on. The logistic costs in India is, I think the report said, around 9% GVA at basic prices. But other reports, which I will not be able to tell you right now, but the estimates has varied from 13 to 14%, which is very high. So, nevertheless, whether it is 9% or 13 to 14%, it is very high compared to the developed world. So, no gainsaying that logistics efficiency in India has to improve. Now, the government is doing, I would say, it's quite seized of the matter, and that's why you had this Gati Shakti, PM Gati Shakti master plan. And now, as you know, recently the new logistics policy has been announced. So I'll not go into details of the policy. What it is addressing is the questions you raised, and railways have a important part in it. Multimodal transportation of goods seamlessly, because what happens today is, at the railway loading and unloading point, the transfer from road to rail is very complicated and not efficient at all, and that's why a lot of traffic is, basically has moved away from rail, which is carrying only about, I think, about 26-27% of total traffic, whereas the aim should be to take it to what it used to be. Of course, is not possible, but in this economy, 40 to 50%. uh, have, good systems to transport these FMCG products, perishable products, and so on a timetable basis. And these are the things this Gati Shakti plan and the logistics policy aims to address. And I would think it's very important. And without going into detail once again, I would think strong work is going to take place in this area. And I hope it will improve the things substantially.
It's good to have that optimism from somebody who's always been as balanced as yourself. But I will ask you to go into a little more detail as to how you expect the plans to actually play out in implementation when it comes to the railway specifically.
Yeah, I'll give you one specific example. So there's a lot of emphasis on building terminals, cargo terminals, which
Yeah.
would be support intermodal traffic, which was not there. Then, uh, of course, the pricing also has to be more dynamic than it is today, and that part would also be addressed, because gone are the days when railways could just say that I will carry only these seven bulk commodities. I'll carry coal, cement, fertilizers, steel, and food grains. And i'm because the traffic in these areas is not going to increase much. As you know, coal may show a little increase, but it's doomed to fritter away with time, for obvious reasons, greening and so on. Food grains also is not going to increase that much. Fertilizers, maybe not. Cement. So, without going into that much details, it has to integrate, and these building of these terminals would be one. There a lot of stress is going on that. Pricing would be another aspect, when holistically the whole thing has to be looked up. These things have to be done. Some products and some companies are are being weaned away from road and brought to railways. With these issues, it has to be done more strongly. And I'm sure there are many other measures which I have not studied at this point, neither the policy nor the Gati Shakti plan. But what I'm telling you is purely from a common sense perspective.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I'm not directly involved right now in these, and but my cursory glances did show that some of these age-old, long-standing issues are getting addressed.
All right. So, well, I'm glad that we have that view because again, logistics is one of the backbones of any developing economy. It makes it all the more important. So, and the railways in a country like India will always play a very major role in such a development. So, all right, moving on to a similar thing. We've seen the railway networks expand to areas that it wasn't there at all. Kashmir, the northeast states, they've all started to be covered by railway. Uh, do you see it going at a reasonable speed? Do you see that it will? probably help with developing the economy there in terms of helping industrial growth, providing the infrastructure that industries need. How far are we from something like that, from an actual
Yeah,
impact?
okay. So first thing about the essentiality, absolutely, because you see, the Britishers built rail in India to govern India, to move military, to move raw materials, to bring back factory-built materials from. I doubt if they had the motivation to develop India as such. Whatever. In course of time, railways did prove to be a unifying factor. It did move towards liberation of India, and after independence, it has played a very, very strong role in unifying and developing growth of India. So, in such a scenario, you can't have the remote parts of the country not connected by rail. First of all, simply from the standpoint of unification of the country. So Northeast, a lot of work this government has done in Northeast and is been pursuing strongly in Jammu and Kashmir. So it is absolutely essential for India to be one country. I start with that, and then obvious spin off is in terms of development of economy of those areas. You cannot keep them deprived from a major means of transport. I mean, you need to have good roads, you need to have good rail. So it's absolutely essential. And why government has a big role is because it's not going to be remunerative in the beginning. It may not even show up in the remuneration of railways. It will show up in the improvement of their economy. First of all, the psychology, and then the economy of that region. You cannot see it with the myopic eye of only railways, finances, and so on. But from a broad vision for the country, absolutely essential. And I'm glad the great work is being done in that area also.
Right, I have one last question, and this is it just struck me right now. I've been seeing, since you mentioned psychology, I've been seeing a lot of travel blogs, Indian travel vloggers, in fact, who are showcasing the newer trains and the facilities that train routes provide today in terms of hygienic pantries and all those decorations, also the route, right, the Ramayan, people following Rama's journey, and those initiatives have been undertaken by this government. Do you see that having an impact in people, maybe passengers at some point preferring the experience of trains over
Yeah.
perhaps a quick
Ab-
aircraft journey?
yeah, yeah. You see, freedom is good. And what these new bloggers, YouTubers represent is total freedom to report
Mm.
and not restricted to whatever the main news media reports.
That's it.
So but then it comes at a price, and the price is that sometimes they expose things which doesn't come
Mm.
out in good media, and it's good. Sometimes they overhype things. Sometimes they go into all kinds of unjustified narratives. But that's again, as I would say, a smaller price to pay for this freedom. It is a chaotic medium. It's not a controlled medium, and I don't think we should attempt to control it. And a chaotic medium with some very good aspects and some, of course, drawbacks. We have to live with both, and I would think that it's a good thing overall.
All right. Well, that's really all I had. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sudhanshu ji. And I look forward to having you on again. And I will link your blog down below because I think that has a lot of material that users can, viewers can really use to get an inside view and not have come back with half-baked opinions. So I think, I'll just link that below. So thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.